exercise 3.1 on page 3-3. So first thing we're going to do, I've got already open already. Open that if you don't have it. We've got an f.workspace. We've got this work set, the training data work set 22049555201_CE. And we need to open the ALGN RD01 file. For me, it's showing in the list, but if it doesn't, you can always browse to it. And it's going to be in the roadway folder, ALGN RD01. I'm just going to open that. This is one of the big changes from SS4, SS10 workflow is that super elevation now lives in this file in a separate model within this file. It's still going to get assigned to the corridor and referenced into the model file. So it just goes straight to the alignment, which I happen to have some other things referenced in just because we were constructing an alignment and needed some references to set it up properly. And so it's just, plan and profile. That's kind of what you usually see. That's the default views. So we need to go to the super elevation views over here. The one caveat I'll say, so it does super elevation in both views. So you're going to have to, if you hit F2, you try to bring the 3D view. Well, I got super elevation 3D over here, but over here it's just default. So what I can do, if I do that, F2, that's fine. Just got to keep in mind that that's a limitation of that, those shortcuts as well as the shortcuts here on these view controls. Plan 3D is going to do the same thing. It's going to be default. Well, actually, it's default 3D on that one because it switched over to default. So I'm going to do F2. This is super elevation 3D, and over here is default. So what I have to go over here is the view attributes and change this model under view setup. So it may be that this is shrunk down here. So the top left corner right here, click the little drop down beside that button. That brings up view attributes. We're doing this on view 1. And then change under view setup and expand that out. Under models, just change it to super elevation. So you should see super elevation over here in the view 1, super elevation 3D over here in view 2. And we may not need the 3D view much on this, which is fine. We can close it out later, but just a good starting point. So I'm just going to go ahead and save settings on that so that I don't have to redo this if I close this file out. This is kind of preliminary to exercise 3.1. There's some additional setup steps. So what we're going to do first really is just look at the template to make sure that the super elevation flags are set up correctly. So we're going to go over here to Corridors tab, or you can just do the F12 shortcut. And I'm just going to do the Create Template. So that should open up our ITL file. I trust it's the right one because for some reason it's not showing up here. If in doubt, I can always do file open and manually check it, manually open it. So it's 22049555201_CE. So it's open. It's just a display glitch, probably because my path is too long. Because on my computer, my worksets folder happens to be on my OneDrive. For most people, it's going to be C worksets, so you would see that across here. So we're going to go under corridor templates here, and see, we're looking for the SR61 inside TS. So just double click, make that one active. Or you can, right click, set active, regardless. And then switch over here in this tab to active template. This is step 4 that we're on right now. So we're looking for super elevation. So what you want to do is click on the super elevation points right here. Just click on the folder. which will only show up once you click the active template. And notice that it highlights across here several different points. So these are points that have super elevation flags turned on. So if I edit one of them, just double click on it. This option right here, super elevation flag, is checked on for that. So what you want is any point on the pavement that's affected by super elevation, you need that super elevation flag turned on. So this is already set up because we built the template for you already, so you didn't have to set it up. But often in some of the default templates it may be set up, but for your project you probably want to go through and set it up. One of the things I want to point out though, that's worth noting, because of the different options in F.Connect versus SS4 and SS10, there's a lot more super elevation options. To build it correctly, to be able to rotate about the center line for a divided roadway like this, we had to put a null point for the center line, essentially, and then constrain everything else off of it. So this is built. So if I move this null point here, you can see everything follows it. So everything's constrained to it. So this point here is constrained to it with a 2% slope off the null point and a horizontal. And then this one is also 2% off that other edge of pavement point. And you can check here, slope, RT-PGL, 2%, and then the width as well. So when we edit the super elevation, basically what we're doing is changing that slope. So there will be a super elevation lane for this median. Even if there's no pavement there, we need that super elevation lane. So we're going to have that super elevation lane there, and then we're going to have the super elevation lane. Since there's no breakpoints in here, the concept of super elevation lane, even though it's a multi-lane roadway, because there's no breaks across the lane. Now, if it goes from 2% to 3%, you'd probably have another breakpoint in there, and that would be additional super elevation lane where the default is 3%, and it's got to kind of rotate step by step. So for this one, it's going to have, turn off the point name so you can see the points a little bit cleaner here. Zoom in a little bit. So you can see it's going to have essentially 4 super elevation lanes for the main line. 1, 2, 3, 4. So this, go back to the super elevation points, turn those on so you can see that nice and clear. So between each super elevation flag sets. So the nice thing about F.Connect is you want to, if you have this set up in your template ahead of time, you can bring in the template when you're calculating super elevation, and it will build the lanes for you based on the template. So it makes life a lot easier. It makes the calculations go a little bit quicker. If you want, you can check, and this is, exercise 6 says, okay, check the same thing for the median curb template. So if I go over to library, because we have, remember, 2 template drops on that. So you want to make sure all your template drops have the same thing, and this one does. So but there's my super elevation points. So I'm going to close that. And that brings us to exercise 3.2. And the first step we kind of already did here, preparing the alignment file for super elevation. We switched to the super elevation views. We set it up. You can see the 3D one already too. Just in this file, because we were working on it, it has a 3D view already created. From a blank alignment or a fresh alignment where you haven't been messing around with super elevation, you will only have the super elevation views in this menu. So there won't be 3D yet. So to simulate that, I'm just going to close this out. Just show the 2D. So just go down here, switch. That's the first step there, is just go down here and switch to super elevation views. And then we need to attach anything. There's nothing in this file right now. If I do fit view, no elements found. So step 2, we need to go ahead and attach a few files as a reference. So I'm going to come up here to Home tab and click Attach. I'm going to click Attach Reference. And we need the alignment file. Oh, this is going to be attaching the alignment from the default model of the same file. So the ALGN RDO1, we're going to need the DSGN RDO1. So hold down Control, click that one. We're going to need the ALGN RDO1. Okay, I already got that one. The MODL RD mainline 61. So this one is what's going to allow us to attach the corridor, reference that in, and it'll build automatically. So that's the main thing: alignment file, model file, and design file. And the design file is mostly so we can see the geometry to make sure our lanes are set up correctly, and then the alignment so we can, of course, can follow the alignment. So click those 3 and do open. Make sure the alignment is bringing in the default model. I mean, it should be, but just make sure, because we don't need to reference our own model in. MODL RD mainline, also default model. Click OK. DSGN RDO1, also click OK. All right, so it should look like this in your 2D view. So you can see your template drop and your corridor handles here. And you can see all your line work from the design file. So that wraps up exercise 3.2. Now we can go straight to exercise 3.3. Now there's a couple extra steps if you really want to create it manually. There's some optional exercises in there. I think the next two, 3.4 and 3.5 show you how to do it, but the step we're going to use will basically automate everything for us. I'll still show you some of the other tools on how to calculate it. But just, so that's kind of an on your own if you ever need it for a reference. But the easiest way is going to be the way that I'm going to show here. So exercise 3.3, top of page 3-5. We're going to go to the corridors tab. And we're going over here. Most of the tools for this session are going to be in the super elevation section right here. So first thing, same logic. Usually you start from here for the first workflow. Create. Now if you click this drop down, there's 3 different options here. Okay. And a couple of them, this one has been around, I think since ORD came out at least. But this one is fairly new. I think with the current release that we're supporting, the create super elevation sections, I think at least as of 10.8 that they added that feature. So create super elevation sections does have the option not just to select an alignment, but also to select a corridor. So when you select a corridor, it'll use the templates that are in that corridor to build the super elevation lanes, and then it goes through all the steps. So it makes things a little bit quicker. There's just a few quirks that we're going to have to be aware of. All right, so I'm doing create super elevation sections, first one in the list. All right, so the name, I'm going to call it SR61. And then I'm going to select, it asks me to locate the corridor or alignment. This is where I'm going to select the corridor handle down here, not the alignment. Oh, one caveat here. There's an option for feature definition. It's going to, feature definition. So you want to select that super elevation manually because it doesn't actually prompt you for the feature definition, I believe. So it's better to just go ahead and set it here in the dialog. Just set that feature definition. You can give it a name if you want. SC is fine. So there's only really one option here, super elevation or no feature definition. So we do want a feature definition. The lane creation method should be by template. So that's the one that's going to pick up the templates from the corridor. So that's good. for our purposes, we don't have to worry about the minimum tangent length, but this will, if you have a lot of curves, basically what it'll do based on this setting, it'll create one super elevation section for your whole project, or it'll do one per curve, depending on how much tangent is between each curve. That's going to be used on this number. So you can play with that number if you need to automatically split the sections for a corridor with multiple curves back to back, or even if they're spaced out a little bit, and this one's going to be designed a little bit differently. So you'd rather have different super elevation sections, you can certainly do that. And this will just make it a little bit easier to automate it if you set this accordingly. But for our purposes, we're just going to leave it at the default right now. We're going to select this corridor handle right here. And now it's asking me for the XML rule file. And I can always do Alt down according to the prompt, but I'm just going to come over here and do the little 3 dots. So this kind of went into, now it's going in to create super elevation. So I'm going to select the 3 dots, and it should take you to your f.connect folder, the install folder. So it should be under f.connect, organization civil, f.superelevation. And so if it takes you to the right place by default, you'll see the f._superelevation.xml. So open that. Now it changes again, this dialog. Now that it loaded the XML file, it has all these settings. Again, it's not going to prompt you for these settings, so don't just accept. Do not accept yet. So you want to change all these settings here to make sure it matches your file and how you want it. So for the Emacs, this is the 10.5 Well, this is a low-speed roadway, so it's 5%. The L selection, it's basically we got low speed. There's another one for low speed restricted. If you're in restricted conditions, it changes some of the minimums. High speed, it does depend on number of lanes. You have different design. Speed table, I think, is the one that's going to be used for the Emacs 2% because it's set up a little differently, so it doesn't have a formula. It's just using tables. So we're going to make sure that's f.low speed, and then design speed is 45. Pivot method, if you click the drop down here, there's a little bit of a preview. You can kind of understand it a little bit. You can see the crown, it's going to go around the crown, and you can kind of see the little diagram of how it's rotating. You got inside edge, outside edge. Those are just opposite of each other. There's also left edge or right edge. Same concept as inside or outside. It's going to be left or right, not relevant to whether the curve is the inside of the curve or not. And then you got divided inside. This would be for your high-speed roads where it's rotating about the inside PGL on the median. So even though ours is divided, we're basically using crown or center line. So center line is really the same as crown. You can see the illustration there. Not much difference. So per the manual, we're supposed to be using inside edge. I think that's based on the FDM for this. Everything rotates about the inside edge. So I'm going to select the inside edge. And make sure everything else is right. Because you still got a chance to set your feature definition. So when I accept this, I think it's going to just go to the next step, and this is going to go away. So just double check it and then accept. Okay, so it does ask me for the minimum tangent length. So I got one more option. And then it may seem like it freezes up here. There's a runtime variable that's added in here, and this is a workaround that we had to make because my display is set to zoom in. This edge width is covering it up, but you can still kind of double click and can barely see that it's highlighted. Hopefully, if you have it at like 100%, you won't have this issue. That I think mine's set to like 125. So there's a few glitches with that. So I'm just going to type in 80. So this is the width of the super elevation area. So it's basically pavement edge to pavement edge. The only time where it would vary is if you're doing a high-speed roadway, where basically like the high-speed divided, where you have the way the super elevation is set, it only depends on each lane. So then it would just be the pavement edge to pavement edge for that one lane. But for all the low-speed ones, it's going to be the pavement edge to pavement edge from the outside of the roadway across the whole roadway, including the medians, all of that. So it's 80 feet is dimension for this. So if you were to measure from this UP to this EUP, that's the figure we'd get. So I'm just going to type in 80. Hopefully it's right because I can't see it. And click OK on that runtime variable. And then it built the sections. There they are. Now it does cut them short. You can see here this white, that's the transition area. And that's because our the corridor stops before it has time to fully transition. But that's not a huge deal. We'll still address it and resolve it. And so it actually it went ahead and calculated it for you. So you can see based on, if you're familiar with how this works in SS4, is the colors indicate the direction of slope. That's pretty much the same way on that. If you hover over this, you can see there's a lane here in the median, and there's also some numbers on the handles. You got a lane on this side of the median, so yellow means it's sloped. In this one, it's sloped down to the right, essentially, in this case. And the green means it's sloped down to the left. So this is a normal crown section over here by the intersection. It's normal crown, and this starts to transition first on the outside of the curve. And then we have white is basically near 0%. And then it starts to get a reverse crown in here. And then this starts to get a little bit darker. It's not a lot, but it's a little bit darker here. You may or may not be able to see that change. But it goes to, I think it's like 3% or something. It should show if you select it. It's I think it's 2.4. This is why it's not very noticeable. So it goes right here to 2, and I think it says 2.4 right there. So we'll open the super elevation editor and we'll look at that some more later, but just so you understand what these are. Okay, so that wraps up exercise 3.3. So we skip down now to exercise 3.6 because the next two are the ones where you do it manually. Don't need to do that because we've done it here. So the first step, we need to just select a section, get those handles to display. And this outer boundary, this green boundary here, will be the section boundary. So I can select that. I see several handles. It's easier to see here. All right, so this text is a little bit hard to read on the handles. It may be fine on your machine, depending on the size of your screen and everything. There's an option to change that. So you guys can see what I'm doing better. I'm going to change it. I'll show you how to do that. And this is not in the exercise. It's a little extra step. So if I go over here to the File menu, and then go down to Settings, about the middle here. And then on User Settings, there's a few different options here. I want to go to Preferences, about the third one from the bottom. Click on that. And if it didn't already, change it to View Options Civil down here. That's the last option. And we want to go to Manipulator Settings. Okay, so this is the handle that we need to grab, the manipulator size. I'm going to change that to 25 to make it bigger. If you want to change the color, you can change the color. I'm going to make it something different because the orange on orange isn't working well for me. So let's just make it, purple is going to be a little dark. I'll just make it green for now. Probably with green is going to be green on green, but we'll give that a shot. See if we can see it. Manipulator font. I'm going to change that so you can read the text a little better. I'm just going to change that to 2, and then click OK on that. And click the back arrow. If you need to, you can go off of it back on, but so made the settings right away. So now I can zoom in a little bit if I have trouble seeing what's what. So because I made it green, you can see it hides a little bit. If I hover over it, I can see the full text. All right, so back to the exercise here. So we're zoomed in on the end of the section. That's step 2. We want to grab that in-station manipulator and drag it. So we're going to extend a section to get past the transition. Even if we don't, well, for the purposes of the training class, we're not going to build a roadway there. But let's say maybe you're in initial stages, but you want to go ahead and calculate super elevation, but you haven't done a corridor here. And really, on this project, there's a transition section through here. So you probably would want to go ahead and extend this just to do the calculations to make sure they're all right. So let's extend it pretty far out, somewhere around station 717 or so. Now I cannot see the stations here, so you notice that doesn't change. What we need to do is let's just annotate that alignment in this so we can see the station numbers. So I'm just going to come over here to the drawing production tab. And if I go to element annotation, just click annotate element and select that green center line and then reset. Okay, now I've got station numbers. That makes it easier to see what I'm doing here. So here's station 717. I need to go at least there to make sure I get in transition. I think might be better to go to like 718, just be on the safe side. So I'm going to grab this manipulator here on the end, which is changing my end station. So I'll go to, way out here somewhere. And you can see it automatically redid the calculations too, or it already had them stored to extend that out. Now, we actually need, so there's different ways to do the, so on the outside of the lane, this curb needs to match this super elevation section. Now, there's different ways to do it. You can certainly just do a point control manually and say, from this station to this station. But we could also do a super elevation lane and basically super elevate that curb. It's a little bit, there's a few extra steps with that because of the way we split it. So it's in a different model. Remember this model, it generated automatically, so it's not in there. If I had the curb in there, it would have actually generated the lane for it. So you wouldn't have to do these extra steps just because of the way we split it. There's a few extra steps. So we're going to have to create that. If we create that curb lane manually, so we're just going to say, the default slope of the curb is actually 9.375, this direction. And then it goes, the transition is going to happen a little bit differently. It's not going to be that long. You don't want your long, flat stretch of gutter. But by the time this starts to get into positive super elevation, that's where the gutter needs to match the slope. So by the time you get past 0, or the time you hit 0, then it should be rotating with it. All right, so we're going to add, this is exercise 3.7. We're going to add the super elevation lane for the curb. And you can do this for other lanes as well if you made modifications after you created the super elevation sections, you need to add another lane, or if you just don't have it in your corridor yet, you need to add it, you can do that. So We're going to the corridors tab. Back to the super elevation section here, and we're going to create this middle one here, create super elevation lanes. So we kind of did the sections. We go down to the next one, create super elevation lanes. The lanes by road template, we're not going to show that tool, but it's going to behave similar to the sections, except instead of using a corridor, you will open the template dialog and select the template there, so you can do that when you don't have a corridor created. But I definitely recommend using the create super elevation sections and selecting the corridor. It's a lot cleaner. All right, so it asked me to locate the first super elevation section. So that's going to be this green boundary around the super section. So locate next super elevation section, reset to complete, so I can add it from multiple if I need to. I only got one section. For the name, I'm going to call this gutter because that's what it is here. I can spell. And hit enter if you typed in the dialog. I did. Let's see. Type is primary, and this is step 2 to outline what this needs to be. So the side of the center line is left. The inside edge offset is 40. So that's from the center line to this edge of pavement. That's the inside edge. So that's 40 feet. Remember, it's 80 all the way across. So it's 40 and 40 from the center line. The width, that's the width of the gutter, the width of the lane. In this case, it's the gutter. So it's 1.5 feet. And the normal cross slope of the lane or the gutter is 9.375. And I accept these settings. I drew it in here and it's red. The reason it's red is because it's steeper than, so it goes yellow, and then as it gets steeper, it's red. So it doesn't get steep enough there, but at 9.375 is much steeper. So it actually means it's going the wrong way, which is not a problem. We'll be fixing that in the next exercise. If it were steeper going this way, it would be blue. So we're going to change it, make it blue later. Well, I guess we'll fix it in here somewhere. Let's see. All right, so we're going to do exercise 3.8. Take a look at the super elevation editor. So that's up in this little tool right here in the right corner of super elevation. It's well hidden. So click the drop down because it's not the first tool, so it may not be the option that's selected. So the second option in the list is super elevation editor. So just select that. It asked me for the super elevation section, so I'm going to grab this handle here. And since the transition isn't set up for the gutter, I want to just clear these out so we can recalculate everything in another step later. So I'm just going to hold down Shift here. So what I'm going to do is scroll down to the bottom and just hold down Shift and select and click on the last row. So that selects all the rows. Well, it should. Hold on. You got to make sure that first row is selected first. Then scroll down, hold down Shift, and select the last row. Might be better to click over here on the left. So now everything's highlighted, and I'm just going to hit the right X over here, the second tool in this little toolbar at the top, and delete. And then close this out. Notice the color's changed. Now there's no super elevation in there. It's just back to normal, normal crown. So 2% that way, 2% that way. We just need to fix this gutter, and that'll be the next step. You want to pause? Thank you for joining me today for the CAD Office series for F.Connect. This was the first part of the super elevation chapter 3 of the F.Connect roadway design 3D modeling guide.